From the Fabric launch event on the 25th of May 2023, there was one feature on the roadmap that got me most excited, and that was Semantic Link. Nellie Gustafsson described how Semantic Link would offer customers much tighter integration between data science and BI. Soon we'll be able to access Power BI datasets from within Python notebooks. Well, I'm pleased to announce that today is the day that Semantic Link is being released into the world. And after being a beta tester of Semantic Link for the past few weeks, all I can say is that the excitement that I had back in May is now 10 times higher after using the product. And so to celebrate the official launch of Semantic Link, we're going to be walking through these elements. And the best part is that it's not just going to be me doing this alone. I'm going to be joined by the architect himself of Semantic Link, Markus Cozowicz, Principal Data Scientist at Microsoft. Throughout this video, you will learn about Semantic Link from one of the main creators, and I'll be interweaving practical guides, hands-on guides of how to use Semantic Link in Fabric notebooks throughout the interview, so that by the end of the video, you'll have a really good understanding of what Semantic Link is, who it's for, and how you can get started using it. So that's enough of an intro from me. Let's dive into our conversation with Markus. So hello, Markus. How are you doing?
Hi, well, doing fine. You?
Great, yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Just before we get started on Semantic Link, can you please just give a very short introduction to yourself and your role in Microsoft?
Yeah, so I'm a architect on the Semantic Link team within Fabric. Yeah.
Awesome, and how long have you been at Microsoft?
10 years plus. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time today. You must be very busy. Semantic Link has now launched and you've got lots of people using it finally. Can you just start by giving us an overview of what is Semantic Link?
Yeah, sure. So Semantic Link is really the bridge between Power BI datasets and the notebooks in Fabric. So the primary use case is to enable data access for Python users, and we are made sure that you can do this using familiar APIs, using Pandas and Spark APIs, but we also want to go further by propagating semantic information that's within Power BI and make them accessible to Python users.
Okay, we'll get back to the interview very shortly, but I just wanted to unpack what Markus is saying there because it's a fundamental point to understand with Semantic Link. He mentioned two core capabilities that Semantic Link gives us. Number one is the ability to read Power BI table data into a Fabric DataFrame. A Fabric DataFrame, as you can see here from the documentation, is the core data structure in Semantic Link. It's basically a subclass of Pandas DataFrame. So if you're a data scientist, you're probably very familiar with Pandas and the Pandas DataFrame. And it's basically a wrapper class around the Pandas DataFrame. So you can do anything that you can do with Pandas DataFrames with a Fabric DataFrame. So on top of the functionality that a Pandas DataFrame gives us, we also have Fabric specific functions and methods available to us to help us explore Power BI datasets, and we'll be looking at what that means now. So now let's look at how we can read our Power BI table data into a Fabric DataFrame. First, we need to install Semantic Link if you haven't already. And we can do this either inline using the %sign and pip install Semantic Link, or you can do this via the workspace settings and go to library management, as we've seen in previous videos how to do that. I've actually already done this, so I don't need to pip install it here. So I'm going to jump straight to importing. So you'll see that it uses a module called SemPy. So SemPy is part of Semantic Link, and it basically gives us all the functionality we need. As you'll see, if you look at the documentation, Semantic Link is kind of the top level name for this package. The thing that you're going to need to be importing is SemPy, and specifically for the core functionality, SemPy.fabric. There are other things as well, but we'll get to that later in the video. So first use case is just getting data from a Power BI dataset into a Fabric DataFrame. So let's look at how we do that. So in my workspace, I have a Power BI report. So this is my workspace. It's called Semantic Link. And in this workspace, I have a report, a Power BI report, and obviously a related data set for that report. And it's called customer profitability sample PBIX. So this is what the report looks like. It's not particularly important what the report looks like for this demo, but just to give you a bit of a feeling for the types of data that we're looking at here. So it's customer sales data, basically. So we've got things like budgets, revenue, all the kind of classic Power BI stuff. But we're not going to be looking at the front end of the Power BI report. What we're going to be looking at is the data set, and specifically we want to read it into a Fabric notebook. So let's look at how we can do that. So if we jump back to our notebook, so to read a table using Semantic Link, this is what we're going to be doing. So we've already imported senpai.fabric as Fabric. We're going to call fabric.readTable, and we're going to pass in the data set, which we've defined up here as simply the name as the data set as it exists in our workspace. And we're also going to read in a specific table within that data set. And for the purposes of this, I'm going to get the customer table. And I'm assigning that to a variable called customer df. So I've just done customer df.head to return the first 3 rows of that data frame. Okay, so this is what our data looks like. Looks like a pretty standard Power BI data set, right? Well, let's have a look at the type of this object. So that's pretty cool. So now we have a Fabric DataFrame object. This is read in our data from the Power BI dataset, and now we have a Fabric DataFrame to play with. And as you saw in the documentation, the Fabric DataFrame is basically a wrapper around Pandas data frames. So anything you can do with a Pandas data frame, you can also do with a Fabric DataFrame. For example, df.shape as a simple example here. So that's basically the first step. We've got our data into a Fabric data frame. The second use case that Markus mentioned was accessing semantic information about the Power BI dataset. Obviously our Power BI datasets, they have data, but they also have relationships between the tables, right? And they also have measures. So how can we explore all of those things within Python, within our Fabric notebooks? So now, again, we're defining our data set. That hasn't changed, but now we're going to call fabric.listRelationships. We'll pass in the data set again. So here it's returning a data frame of our relationships, and it's telling you what type of relationship that is. In this case, it's a many-to-one. M-to-1 is many-to-one. Tells you what table it goes from, what column, and the to table and the to column. So that's really interesting. We can see the relationships within our data. So if you're a data scientist, you don't have to figure all this stuff out for yourself. It already exists in the Power BI model. We're just reading it into our Fabric notebook. But we can go one step better than that. Now I'm importing senpai.relationships, import plot relationship metadata, and we get this visualization of the relationships. So we can see visually, okay, what connects to what. So we've got a fact table here, and we've got some dimension tables, customer dimension. So that's really cool. So that's relationships, and we can do a lot more things with relationships. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to keep it basic so that we can cover kind of lots of ground. We also mentioned that we can view measures. So we can also call fabric.listMeasures, and we can see what measures exist in that Power BI dataset. Okay, so we've got the table that the measure is attached to, we've got the measure name, and we've also got the DAX expression that makes up that measure. And we've also got the data type, right, for that measure. So this is starting to be really powerful stuff here. But we can do one more than that. We can actually evaluate measures from within our Python notebook. So if we call fabric.evaluateMeasure, we're passing in the data set and the measure name. So here I'm getting total revenue, which was one of our measures up here. Total revenue, the first one. So there you go. You see it's returning the total revenue into our Fabric notebook. And we can go one step more than that as well by doing cool things like group by. So here what I'm doing is I'm getting the total revenue, which is one of our DAX measures, and I'm grouping by a column in a different data set, right? It's a different table. It's in the product table. So you can start to see kind of the power of this, extracting data and measure values, and even by grouping by different tables and all this good stuff, and returning it into our Fabric DataFrame so that we can do, this might be a step in feature engineering, for example. You might want to do some machine learning on top of this. You might want to validate that your measures are written correctly and returning results that you are expecting. Okay, so now we have a really good understanding of two of the core capabilities of Semantic Link. Let's jump back into the interview.
Yeah, I think that's so important because I think one of the key benefits of Semantic Link from my understanding is, the Power BI developers have all this domain knowledge that goes into crafting these relationships. And so the data scientists can now kind of leverage all of that domain knowledge and that semantic layer that's already been built, right, in these Power BI data sets.
That's right.
Okay, so I think you touched on a few things there, but can you just spell out who do you think the core users of this feature will be?
Yeah, so I think there's three personas that we identified. The first ones is probably the most obvious ones are like data scientists that want to collaborate with BI analysts so that they can work on the same data and have a common ground. The second one is BI analysts themselves that want to expand their scope and dabble in Python, be familiar with the data, with the concept of DAX and whatnot, but be able to use all the Python environment. And then you briefly mentioned it already, like Power BI developers is also one of the target group that we have because they're looking into automation and with notebooks and like the research-free environment, you can quickly get started on Fabric.
Yeah, awesome. And I've been playing around a little bit with Semantic Link, and I was actually surprised by how kind of wide the scope is. There's lots of things available to you now with Semantic Link. Can you maybe just give us an overview of what are the core parts of Semantic Link that people can start playing around with?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, like the data access one is the most important one, and maybe just take a step back here. If you think about Power BI data sets in like medallion architecture, it's really your gold layer, the most refined, the most valuable data in your organization. So we're trying to unlock the potential of the data to the big ecosystem, the vast ecosystem that Python has. And by I think that the element that you can get started, the easiest one is just like read your tables, evaluate your measures, execute DAX queries if you're familiar with those things, and get them into Fabric data frames, which are really Pandas data frames at its core, and get rolling with it. And another one that we get frequently asked is data validation. So there's excellent tools out there in Python that help you do data validation, and we want to support our customers in maintaining high quality data sets.
Okay, I'll cut back to the interview in 1 minute, but I just wanted to pick up on something that Markus mentioned there and explain in a bit more detail. So we can access Power BI data within our Python data frames, right? Within our Fabric data frames. And as he mentioned, this opens up the entire ecosystem of Python tooling, especially when it comes to data validation. But Semantic Link itself can help us with data validation too. And I just wanted to highlight one of the features in Semantic Link that helps us explore and validate relationships between different tables. So that's what I'm going to briefly look at now, okay? So here I'm using the same data set, customer profitability. And what I'm going to be doing is generating a dictionary with key value pairs, whereby the key is the table name and the value is the actual table. So this is what this is going to look like. So it's going to it's going to loop through all of the tables because we're doing fabric.list tables in the data set. So that'll be all of the tables in our data set. And it's constructing this dictionary. Then when we have this dictionary, and you can see that the keys of that dictionary are fact, BU, date, scenario. So these are the tables in that data set, right? Then what we can do is perform list relationship violations. We're going to pass in our tables, and we're also going to pass in the relationships, and are going to return that using this display, just so that we can visualize what this looks like. Okay, so we've just run list relationship violations, right, on our tables in our data set. And this is what the return looks like, okay? So I'm going to talk you through this in a bit more detail. What this data frame analyzes basically is both sides of every relationship in our data set. And it tells us specifically, for example, these top two rows, it shows us where values in the fact table are not present in our dimension table. And that occurs 21 out of 90 times, basically. So it's saying there's 21 values in the fact table, the customer column, that are not present in our dimension table. So that's obviously going to affect your calculations, your measures, basically any insights that you draw from this data set. And it's a similar story for row number 2, which is a relationship violation between the fact table and the product table. And we've also got some other violations here between the customer table and the state, and the customer table and the industry. So we can very quickly identify where there's kind of data quality issues between both sides of a relationship between two tables. So that's very, very useful. Okay, there's a lot more things we can do in terms of checking data quality and data validation within Semantic Link, but I just wanted to show you that one thing. In future videos, I can go into a lot more detail about these things, but I know you're dying to get back to Markus, so we'll head back for the last section of the interview.
So, Markus, what aspect or feature of Semantic Link are you most excited for your customers to start using?
That is an excellent question. I think it's actually not so much about particular APIs or so, but really more about the workflow and the collaboration aspect, how people might change or how it helps them alleviate like duplicating work, right? So in a lot of feedback that we got, BI analysts and data scientists, they're working on the same data, right? They both want to support decision makers to get insights out of their data, but then they need to re-engineer the features because the one group lives in a world of Power Query and DAX and multiple dimensional data, and the other group lives in data frames, be it Pandas, Spark, or whatnot, and needs to retransform. And maybe some of that will still have to happen because you might need to have different aspects, but we're hoping that we can foster that collaboration. And I'm really curious to see how our customers how they're evolving, how their usage patterns, the collaboration elements are evolving over time.
Yeah, I bet from just my short time looking at Semantic Link, my kind of mind went crazy with like ideas for different workflows. I think there's going to be a lot of creativity, let's say, around how people use these features. Do you have any defined workflow that you're kind of expecting people to work to, or are you doesn't matter so much to you?
You mean like the expected workflows? Just on clarification. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for sure, the validation use cases, because we got so much feedback about them, that will be one where we will see data engineers coming in, supporting BI analysts on the more profane, I would almost say, like validation use cases that are compared to, I don't know, some advanced machine learning techniques or so that you would want to, it's maybe more grunt work, but it's important, right? It's like getting your data quality right is a really, really important aspect. So we want to support people there. I mean, the element that we're looking for is maybe to augment your Power BI reports that go in front of your leaders, your decision makers, with some of the more state-of-the-art machine learning techniques that you might not be able to use right now, or that are a bit more complicated to integrate, to see them pop up and flow back. But we're also, as you said, we're curious how people will use it, and I think especially when you have a tool where you can't imagine all the ways that people will use it, that's where the most interesting ones come up, right?
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point around that kind of loop back. Because the traditional workflow is kind of you get some data, transform it a bit and put it in Power BI, and that's kind of the end of the loop. Whereas now I feel like with Semantic Link, that's not the end of the loop anymore. There's kind of a bit of a full circle, and it's probably going to be iterative. So yeah, I think that's really exciting. And so you've reached the first kind of major milestone, let's say, Markus, and you've got this, let's say, version 1 of Semantic Link. But can you tell us what the future holds for Semantic Link in terms of, do you have a roadmap? And if so, what are you looking to focus on now?
We do have a roadmap. The element I can share with you at the moment is that the first thing that we'll tackle is more automation elements. So things like Power BI refreshes, and maybe even going deeper and exposing more elements of what Power BI and Fabric as a whole to the Python ecosystem. That seems to be the biggest feedback item that we got so far. But obviously, as we're rolling this out in public preview now, we'll monitor what people put up on Fabric ideas to understand what people are voting for, and they should. We're as a product group, we're taking a close look at those things and want to understand what our customers want.
Great, yeah, so that's a strong call to action. If you have any ideas for Markus and the team for future development of Semantic Link, then definitely go to the ideas page in Fabric. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to mention, Markus?
Yeah, no, I think we got mostly covered. I think we have a good overview of things. I think your tutorials will and the how-tos will get people started, and we're really looking forward to get more feedback from folks to understand how this should evolve and what we can improve to make people even more productive.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time today, and thank you very much on behalf of the whole community, really, for your work on this feature and Semantic Link in general. I think it's going to have a really big impact actually on the whole data workflow in organizations. I think it's going to change quite a lot. So thank you.
Looking forward to that.
Wow, that was so cool, right? I hope you enjoyed hearing from the architect of Semantic Link himself. For me, one of the key takeaways here is that I think Semantic Link is going to be disruptive. It allows us to adopt new workflows for how we work with data within our organizations. And a workflow, for example, whereby Power BI is no longer the end of the road for our data. Semantic Link allows us to extract more value and more insights from our Power BI datasets. And soon it will allow us to automate more Power BI tasks like dataset refreshing. And the best thing is that in this interview, we barely even scratched the surface, to be honest, of what is possible within Semantic Link. There is so much we didn't cover, including some of these things like dependency violations, and related to this is functional dependencies, reading Power BI datasets into Spark data frames, evaluating DAX expressions from within a notebook, feature engineering, performing machine learning on Power BI datasets, and then writing back your predictions into a Lakehouse table so that you can then visualize them in your Power BI report. Full circle on that data workflow. So even that, there's a lot more to go through. So if you want me to explore any of these topics in future videos, then let me know which one specifically in the comments, or if there's anything else you want me to go through, leave a comment and I'll definitely get to it in a future video. Finally, I want to say a big thanks to Markus and his team for unleashing Semantic Link to the world. Now it's over to you. Go to the documentation page, learn more about Semantic Link, download the sample notebooks and play around with them, and find those workflows that work for you. And make sure you report back to me, leave a comment down below or comment on the LinkedIn page. I would love to hear how you're using Semantic Link. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video for more Fabric goodness.